slightly away from the topic of Palestine and Gaza. And it's a well-known fact that people are making the sacrifices, and the end result is they want to do what is correct. The Zionists and the West is obviously basically got their own agenda. They're driven by materialistic pursuits, and there have been talks that because gas and oil has been discovered in Gaza, that they have a financial interest there. Now, in South Africa, as you mentioned briefly, that we can say what we want, but we can do very little. Now, we have a situation where we have a government in place controlled by the African National Congress, and there are major problems in terms of service delivery. We have about 15 minutes left, and we were chatting last week briefly about the different parties competing the elections next year. And our former president, who has been the subject of a lot of investigations for corruption and fraud, and these cases are being deferred and postponed forever and a day, he initially committed to support the ANC, and suddenly he swung and he's joined this new party called MK. And we believe there are other parties of former ANC comrades that have been formed. For example, Ace Magashule is involved with another party, and a few other strong supporters of the ANC are moving away. Now, you mentioned briefly that this could cause huge losses to the ANC in terms of 2023 elections, and also it can impact on other parties as well, including the DA, because the DA's position on Palestine is not clear. Perhaps you just want to give us a bit of a feedback on what's the thinking on the ground, the latest thinking relative to the formation of these new parties of ex-ANC supporters.
It's good to have who has now become a good friend of mine,
Sheikh Noor Aswad.
Sheikh Noor.
He's expounded some very important information.
We've had a good chat.
And maybe in the next program, before Suk ends, we're going to have a detailed chat on
No, we've had a good chat. We sat on the same table at the gala. I liked his recital, very deep.
His recital is the original Arabic.
Yeah, very deep, very deep. And so we've become good friends in the spirit. The situation in South Africa, and he's explained the situation of Syria. I had a good understanding of what's his name, al-Bashar, who is the king or the president or whatever you want to call it. South Africa is very different. We have 80 to 20, meaning 8 out of every 10 people are African, black-skinned. And the struggle against apartheid was a war waged not by 80% of the population, but very much by a minority which comprised of African, those of Indian origin, those of mixed race origin, which is colored. They constituted 95% of the struggle stalwarts, and then white people were probably 1 or 2%, and Jews were probably also 1 or 2%, maybe 5. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Post-apartheid, with the advent of democracy, those who fought the struggle were, in most cases, ostracized, pushed on the side. Laws were made, which laws are now that colored and Indian, those of mixed race and those of Indian origin, whether Muslim, whether Indian, whether Pakistani, are defined as black but are not black in terms of the Triple B Amendment Act. So they are allocated positions or allocated percentages. So now, for example, in Durban, those of Indian origin constitute 22% of the population, but in terms of the Act, they will only get 5% of the work, maybe 11% max. So those are the dynamics. In the Western Cape, colored people are 55%, but they'll only be given 22% of all economic work. So things have changed in the ANC. So much so, Eunice, that they started fighting amongst themselves. And we have a situation now with Jacob Zuma, where he was imprisoned or he was incarcerated, and he has an axe to grind. He's got a hatchet to bury. And so he's doing everything in his power to try and remove the emperor. And that emperor is Cyril Ramaphosa. Some of the dynamics, Eunice, are as follows. We think that this is also just an ANC strategy to get rid of Zuma, of Cyril in the party as the president of the republic, but to consolidate the ANC. So they'll still consolidate the black vote, and we will still be deemed to be on the verges of second-class citizenry. And that is where the dynamics have changed. We are saying to listeners, be very careful of being lulled, of being fooled, of being baited by a narrative which doesn't have your interest at heart. It might change the political landscape, and it's the only landscape that's going to change is that of the ANC. The DA, the landscapes change only because of the Almighty, where the DA, Action SA, COPE, Inkatha, Freedom Front Plus, they've all been exposed by virtue of the fact that they don't have any, I don't want to use the word humanitarian, but more compassionate, spiritual compassion to the war in Gaza. They prefer rather to be slaves to the lenders, because as you know, Jews control most central banks around the world. They control the Johannesburg Stock Exchange by and large. They control most of the economy by and large, and so they fund Action SA through Moshal. They fund the DA. They fund Inkatha through the Konrad Adenauer. So that's when you get funded by them, you got to do what they say.
Definitely.
And so the DA will lose that support with Action SA. The ANC support will go to MK, but once they got rid of Cyril, they'll still come back and still be the ANC. So we're saying to our people, be very careful that you're not, the word's not betrayed, that you're not, that they don't masquerade, they don't put a different face. You think they're not ANC. Ultimately, they're ANC. And we've got to reduce political hegemony. You cannot have a one-party state. And the problem we have in Israel is the Likud and the right-wing parties are those parties who are in government with Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu. And the problem with the Democrats is that George Soros, he funds the DA in part. Maybe not now, but he used to, through the Open Society Foundation. They drive libertarian policies, liberal policies, neoliberal policies of LGBTQI, of non-conservative, of non-faith. They don't want faith-based. They don't want anything to, because they don't believe in God, right? They don't believe in an Almighty. They don't believe that all human beings are going to go up to paradise one day. They don't believe in all that. To them, they believe in human achievement. To them, they believe in wealth. That's what made them, right? And so you can see that dynamic. So there's a war in the world taking place between those who have a faith and those who have a faith in the unknown. And that's the situation, Eunice. And so 2024, we're saying to listeners, be very cautious, of these wolves which come masquerading as sheep. One of them is MK, and the other one is the ANC. They will be reduced, definitely the ANC, but they'll coalesce. They have one objective: to remove Ramaphosa. If they fail, they'll go with either the EFF, the ATM, Ace Magashule, the leftist organizations, and they'll create chaos. The rand will go to 23. We'll be sitting buying a loaf of bread for 20 or 30 rand. We'll be sitting with petrol at different prices. So listeners, voters have got to be extraordinarily conscientious of the future that awaits us in the next 6 months.
Thanks, Sam, for summarizing the whole issue. We'll